Violence gripped Jamaica from the 1970s through the drug wars of the 80s and 90s, marking a time of political divisiveness, musical flourishing, and social upheaval. It's the story of Jamaica's modern history, and in the hands of author Marlon James, it became the Man Booker Prize-winning novel, A Brief History of 7 Killings. And Marlon James joins us now for more. It's great to welcome you to the province of Ontario.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I always like to ask authors this first because you never know. What inspired you to write this?
What inspired me to? I think if I can narrow it down to two things, one was making sense of the 70s. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, but it's a different decade for me than it was for my parents or for anybody who had to go through a lot of the upheavals in the 70s. And I had a sort of nostalgia for a period that I knew very little about. So a lot of it was a fact-finding mission, just trying to reconnect with this decade I clearly went through but didn't. And the other was an article that Timothy White, who wrote the biography Catch a Fire, the Bob Marley biography, did this sort of addendum back in the early 90s, in 91, where he went at length about the men who tried to kill him. I mean, most of them were boys. And that fascinated me because there's just so much of the story he didn't know. And as a writer, that's one of the things I like to do. I like to slip into those cracks, the part where history just can't tell us.
Do you have any firsthand memory of that attempt on Bob Marley's life?
Not really. My memory of most of my memories of Marley, good and bad, were news reports.
You were how old at the time?
I was, let me see, if it was December, I'd have just turned 6.
Yeah, you were a kid.
Yeah, I was a kid, but I was a kid in a small country, and I was a kid in a country where politics shapes everything. And something like that, especially, I guess it would be, it'd be the tantamount to something happening to Madonna, I guess. It's just, it's not something that only the adults would know.
Sure. Do you recall it having an actual impact on you at the time, though?
Not really. I mean, I was 6. Nothing's gonna have an impact on me. 6 is, where's dinner? Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You did, though, as you have attempted to make sense of this time, you've written a sort of a fictionalized account of real-life events, and I want to just read an excerpt from A Brief History of 7 Killings here to move our discussion along. Yeah. Here we go. So here is the singer, along with 2 hoods from a political party he's supposed to not support, and there they are, chummy together like old school pals. The next few days, he's seen hanging out with Shot a Sheriff, the godfather of the 8 lanes, controlled by the other party, the other side. 2 top goons in 1 week, 2 men who pretty much control the fighting halves of downtown Kingston. Maybe he's just being a peacemaker. I mean, he's just a singer. Thing is, I'm catching the drift that nobody is ever just anything in Jamaica. Something's cooking, and I'm already smelling it. Did I mention there's an election in 2 weeks? Let's get an understanding of what you saw as Bob Marley's role in that 1976 election.
Well, he certainly didn't want a role, and I think that's important because I think both parties kept trying to put roles for him. When he agreed to do the peace concert, within I can't remember the exact time, but lightning quick time, the party in power announced general election. So even without trying to appear as if he's working with a party, it appeared that way. So there certainly were attempts to align him. I think the thing that made Marley a concern for politicians is that he wouldn't align. I think if he had just picked a side, it would have been different, and it makes it simplistic. And he was just not on the side of politics. And not being on the side of politics in Jamaica is like not being on the side of religion if you're in a religious right. It's like what are you doing? It's what kind of threat are you posing? And it becomes complicated because it means you can't own him. And it means if he speaks his mind and people start listening to him, there's no way you can cut it short because he does not have an allegiance to you. So I think there was a lot of pressure for him to be political. And I think in a very weirdly ironic way, by not being political, he ended up being political.
What was the motivation for the assassination attempt?
I think that's almost like asking what happened, who killed Kennedy.
Well, we know who killed Kennedy. Oh, now don't go there. Don't go there.
But there are just so many. I'll say this. I think the many forces that were working against Bob Marley reached critical mass, and I think that's important. Because there's just so many. You could go crazy thinking of all of them. I've heard everything from the right-wing party trying to kill him because he may be too much of a threat, to the left-wing party not standing in the way because it would make him a martyr. I think both, can be listened to. I think both are also preposterous. I think, I don't know. The older the country gets and the more we look at it, the more it seems that it could have been political.
Well, as the quote I just read from your book suggests, the neighborhood gangs were very much involved in politics in Jamaica and running Jamaica.
Yeah.
How involved were they?
Involved at every facet of life. They're still involved. Because I think whoever wins Kingston wins Jamaica. And there's a struggle for territory, there's a struggle for the few jobs that were there. Whoever's party is in power, that means you get the jobs. Struggle over territory, struggle over limited resources. And then after a while, when drugs and guns came into the mix, struggle over that. It didn't take long for these political henchmen to realize they're greener pastures by picking up, going after cocaine and marijuana. It was kind of almost inevitable. But even the fear of gunman violence was something that was very motivating in getting people to vote. So they were used. Some were used and discarded. Some were used and realized we can do better than this. But it was a bad marriage that was bad for everybody.
Now, again, you're a little kid at the time, so you may not have recollection firsthand of this, but the Cold War was intense at this time, the middle 1970s. How did Jamaica figure into that war?
Well, the funny thing is, I do have memories of the Cold War, but I have a kid's memories of the Cold War, and there's a scene in the book where one of the characters, Josie Wales, is given a Democracies for Us coloring book. I remember it because I got that coloring book. I remember the coloring book. It was on this page is life in a democracy, and on this page is life in a totalitarian state. And at the time, I just thought it was the lamest comic book ever. But it was actually a sort of propaganda coloring book for children. It was, so the Cold War, looking back in hindsight and realizing just how much of a battle was fought during the Cold War. Back then, I just thought it was a lame book. I didn't even know where it came from. So I think it infiltrated every level of life and government.
Well, of course, the United States government was concerned that where Cuba started in 1960, potentially other countries in the Caribbean would follow.
Well, yeah, and I think the United States also has a knee-jerk reaction to the term democratic socialism. Look at what's happening with Bernie Sanders. I think it's this knee-jerk reaction that all isms lead to communism, as a character says in the book. So when the Prime Minister, Marlon James, announced democratic socialism, all the Cold War bells went off. And it became this sort of really curious battlefield in the Cold War.
His daughter lives in this city,
I know.
You going to see her?
I hope so.
You should see her while you're here. She's been in here numerous times with books that she's done. How about the CIA in Jamaica at the time? What are they up to?
What are the CIA up to? That is a very good question, because it's not like they were new people. The people we ran into in Jamaica are the people we ran into in, some of the people we ran into in the Congo, some of the people we ran into in Ecuador and Guatemala and Argentina and Chile. They got around. And I think it's the same thing. It's the specter of communism wherever it rears its head. I have a feeling if somebody just wore a Chet t-shirt, the CIA would show up the next day. I think wherever the specter, it was just so ridiculous how paranoid the Cold War got.
Here's another excerpt from your book. Flights to New York and Miami, business bursting out of the back pockets, 1,000 dead. Money comes out in the wash and buffets up the ghetto. In the ghettos, abroad, people sniff, cook, boil, and inject. Colombia, Jamaica, Bahamas, Miami, it's an amazing scenario. We see murders everywhere. D.C., Detroit, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Buy guns, sell powder. When building monsters, don't be surprised when they become monstrous. New riders, new posse, the likes of which they have never seen. Let's get into this gang, the Storm Posse, which I guess represents the real Jamaican shower posse. How did they end up in the U.S.?
Yeah, there represent quite a few posses, actually.
Okay.
Because there was more than just a shower posse, and they weren't all Jamaicans. How did they get here? Some got here because once the right-wing government won, they were useless. They didn't serve much purpose anymore. So we're going to take all that brand new skill set. You take them to somewhere that needs them.
Fresh territory.
Fresh territory. But there are also gunmen on the other side who were fleeing the country because their party weren't in power anymore. So you had quite frankly, the two warring sides in Jamaica just switched location to more lucrative territory.
You mentioned Josie Wales a few minutes ago. Who's the real life Josie Wales, the character in your book?
I don't think I was very careful not to pattern any one person. Like some people say, isn't Josie Wales Jim Brown? I was like, I'm pretty sure Jim Brown didn't have that open-minded a view of gay people. I'm going to throw that out there. Plus, he does not look half Chinese. He was, one of the things I learned from nonfiction is composite characters. Is there a particular Josie Wales that I model off? No. Are there Josie Wales in Jamaica? There are tons of them. And yes, some of them with varying levels of intelligence and open-mindedness and whatever. He's a character who physically did not exist, but in a way did and still does.
Is the gang structure that you describe of Jamaica of 40 years ago still the same today in Jamaica?
No, I don't think so.
No?
It's the world's different. I think there are lots of splinters. I don't think there's a grand central anymore, largely because a lot of the grand players are either dead or in prison. I think in the absence of organized crime, you end up with pockets of disorganized crime. And then we end up with some tough decisions we have to make. But I don't think certainly not in the 70s. I don't think that world exists anymore. It's just not that centralized anymore.
Let me ask you about women, because female characters don't necessarily fare too well in your book, and I wonder whether that's sort of indicative of how poorly women fared in Jamaica in general at the time.
I think it's how women without agency fared. I grew up with one of the successful women of Jamaica, so I can't necessarily say that was the fate of all of them. My mom was the first woman to make detective. And she had a pretty successful career, and I'm surrounded by people with successful careers. But I think that part of it being the economy, a lot of it being the legacy of just colonialism, I think there are a lot of women who just had no options, even if they're educated. And there are lots of reasons for it. If you're educated to be a certain class, but you actually don't have the money. For example, my character Nina Burgess is educated like how a well-off, rich Jamaican woman would be educated, but she's not raised to have one of the rich families' men come and marry her. She's not rich enough and she's not white enough. So where does she end up doing? She ends up drifting. There are no opportunities for her, and there were very few opportunities in the 70s, and that also started to dry up. So you end up with women being adrift, women sometimes making harsh and terrible choices. You're also dealing with a very patriarchal society. You're dealing with, certainly Nina is dealing with situations where brutality for women is almost taken for granted.
When did your mother make detective? What year?
Oh, wow, when did she make detective? 1970, around 1978?
Okay, so a little bit after this time period. And did you at the time, I guess you're 8 years old at the time,
Yeah.
Did you appreciate how significant that was at the time?
Of course not. I'm like, where's my dinner? I don't care you make detective.
That's twice you've mentioned dinner. Did she not, she or your father never feed you? Or
oh my
what?
God, they're fantastic cooks. I think that's why I keep fixating on food.
Okay.
No, both of my parents were very good at ensuring that that children lived as children, that we had, and I don't think, and it's funny because they didn't shelter us at all, but they never at any time made us feel that we weren't safe.
Let me ask you about a choice you made in the writing of the book. There is a considerable amount of patois in the book, and some of it is, you know, to an untrained audience is pretty easy to follow, but some of it's a little tough to follow. It's a little challenging. So how come you did that?
Well, I think with any sort of patois, like when Scottish writers write phonetically, I think that certainly part of the thrill for me of reading a novel like Trainspotting was that moment when it clicks.
We had him here a year ago.
Yeah?
I asked him the same question.
Yeah?
Yeah.
He's a really good friend of mine.
He wore a leather jacket and looked, he's not quite as cool as you, I have to say.
I don't know. Very few people can pull off a leather jacket. And Irving probably could. But his novel, yeah, I think at a certain point, it sort of clicks, because I think language works that way. That the way in which no matter how often you read, the best way we learn new languages is still to hear it. So I think, and I am also I'm very concerned about the auditory quality of prose. It should sound like it should be read aloud. And I think eventually, hopefully sooner than later, the reader gets it. I resisted things like a glossary, because I think the problem with glossaries is that you overemphasize the exotic nature of what is not necessarily exotic. I also think some miscommunication can be cool. I love that Junot Diaz does not translate to Spanish in his books. You can Google it, or you can just let that miscommunication pass.
Roll through you, yes. Where's home for you now?
Home for me now is Minneapolis. I've been there 8 years.
Right. Okay, so do you have a good sense about how well this book has been received in Jamaica? Well,
I was there last week, and it has been received super well. I think, I think Jamaicans, a Jamaican reaction to my book is like a Swedish person's reaction to Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, that they can see beyond a book being deeply critical, and this is, very critical, to appreciate one, that it's a work about Jamaica that is looked upon as a serious work. I think they appreciate certainly, the awards and the acclaim it's gotten, and they can appreciate the success in that regard without thinking that it paints a bad picture of Jamaica, because there's no such thing as a bad picture or a good picture of Jamaica. Jamaica is too big for one picture.
Well, just like that book turned into a movie, yours is going to also, isn't it? HBO has optioned this?
Yeah, hopefully we'll get it off. It's a TV show, so it would be interesting to see how this works on the small screen. I like that it's a television show, because then we can spend time and really go into the nuances of it. So
do they plan a series as opposed to a movie?
A series, yeah.
It's a series.
Yeah, I don't think this could have been a movie.
Okay. You tackled Jamaica. What's next?
What's next? I'm tackling Africa in the Middle Ages. I'm writing a novel set between the 9th and 10th century. So in central sort of, if I had to pinpoint an area, it'd probably be southern Ethiopia and northern Kenya. Okay, I'm pretty sure you didn't live through that. So I'm pretty sure. How you doing your research for that one? I've been researching for 1.5 years now, because I handed in Brief History in 2013, so it's new for a lot of people. It's not a new book for me. So I've been researching it for a while. And it's not a historical novel, it's a fantasy novel. Fantasy, sci-fi, and crime fiction remain my favorite genres of literature. Gotcha. Between that and comics, I think I read those the most, and I still do. I wish I was more of a highbrow person. I'm not. The idea of running into or playing with the worlds of fantasy and witches and monsters and a quest and all of that, but within that continent, and it's such a rich history of storytelling. It's just super exciting for me. Neat. I look forward to reading that one. And I'll give you Rachel Manley's email address after we're done if you want. Yeah. Okay. That's Marlon James, A Brief History of 7 Killings. Great to meet you. Thanks for coming into TVO. Thanks for having me.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.